London, 1807. The fog rolled across the cobblestones like a sombre tide, enshrouding the modest residence on Hartwick Lane in a cloak of mournful obscurity. Within those walls, Miss Lydia Aldermont sat rigid before her writing desk, her slender fingers tracing the wax seal of the letter that had arrived but moments ago. The scarlet emblem, bearing the insignia of the Bank of England, remained unbroken, though its message required no divination. The last vestige of the Aldermont fortune was to be claimed, the final sanctuary gone. "Miss," her faithful maid Margaret whispered from the doorway, "the solicitor awaits below. Shall I tell him you are indisposed?" Lydia straightened her spine, a pillar of composure amidst the ruins of her family's legacy. "No, Margaret. One must face calamity with the same countenance one presents to fortune. Bring tea, the Darjeeling, if any remains." The gossip sheets had been relentless these past fortnights. The Aldermont name, once respected throughout Mayfair, now adorned the society pages for reasons most unfortunate. The jewels of Beaumont, they called her younger sisters, Caroline, Elizabeth, and young Georgiana, all gloriously wed to titled gentlemen of substantial means. Their weddings had been heralded as the social triumphs of consecutive seasons, yet not a single column inch mentioned the sacrifices of the eldest sister, whose dowry had been divided, whose inheritance had been mortgaged, whose very future had been bartered to secure their ascension. The solicitor, Mr. Finch, was a pinch-faced man of 50-odd years, whose spectacles glinted like frost in the dim light of the drawing-room. "Miss Aldermont, I regret to inform you that the final extension has expired. Hartwick House must be surrendered within the fortnight." Lydia received his pronouncement with the serenity of one long acquainted with disappointment. "I see. And my father's outstanding debts?" "I fear they are substantial, madam. The creditors grow most impatient." "As creditors are wont to do, Mr. Finch." Her voice remained steady, betraying not a tremor of the tempest within. "Might I inquire as to the sum?" When he named the figure, the teacup in Margaret's hands rattled against its saucer, the only sound in the room that acknowledged the magnitude of the calamity. "I shall require a comprehensive accounting," Lydia said, rising from her seat with glacial dignity. "One cannot navigate treacherous waters without an accurate chart." Mr. Finch cleared his throat. "Miss Aldermont, if I might be so bold, perhaps your sister's husband's—" "That will be all, Mr. Finch." The steel in her voice could have forged a blade. "Good day to you, sir." After his departure, Lydia stood motionless before the window, watching as London society promenaded past, oblivious to the disintegration of her world. The rain began to fall, gentle yet insistent, like the tears she refused to shed. "Margaret," she said at length, "fetch my writing desk. I must compose letters to my sisters." "All three, miss?" "No." Lydia's reflection in the rain-streaked window stared back at her, a ghost of former aspirations. They must be protected from this. Their happiness must remain untainted. That evening, as darkness claimed London, Lydia sat alone in the library, surrounded by the ledgers that chronicled the slow dissolution of the Aldermont legacy. Each page documented her father's descent into ruinous speculation, each figure a milestone on their journey to disgrace. Outside, the carriages of the fashionable world rumbled past, bearing their occupants to soirees and assemblies, where the Aldermont name would be whispered with a mixture of pity and vindication. A sharp rap at the door startled her from her calculations. Margaret appeared, her complexion ashen. "Miss, there is a gentleman caller. At this hour? Surely Mr. Finch has not returned." "No, miss. It is—" The maid's voice faltered. "It is His Grace, the Duke of Greystone." The ledger fell from Lydia's fingers, pages scattering like autumn leaves. Benedict Hawthorne, Duke of Greystone, the man whose name was spoken in hushed tones throughout England, the man whose ruthlessness in court and parliament was legendary, the man who 5 years prior had extended a matrimonial offer to Lydia Aldermont, an offer born of duty and familial alliance rather than affection, only to withdraw it when her father's first financial indiscretion came to light. "His Grace insists upon an audience, miss. He says—" Margaret twisted her hands in her apron. "He says it is a matter of honour." The grandfather clock in the hall chimed 9, an hour when no gentleman of breeding would call upon an unmarried lady. Yet there he stood on her threshold, the most feared peer of the realm, rain-soaked and resolute. "Show him in," Lydia commanded, gathering the scattered pages with trembling hands. "And remain within earshot, Margaret." The drawing-room door opened, and time itself seemed to pause. Benedict Hawthorne filled the doorframe with his imposing presence, his greatcoat beaded with rain, his eyes, those piercing grey eyes that had once assessed her worth and found it wanting, now fixed upon her with an intensity that stole her breath. "Miss Aldermont," he said, his voice deep as distant thunder. "Your Grace." she responded, curtsying with precision that belied her inner turmoil. To what do I owe this, a most unexpected honor? He removed his hat but not his gloves, a subtle indication that his visit would be brief, yet his next words rendered all social protocol meaningless. I came to claim what I should have never lost. A carriage passed outside, its lamps casting momentary illumination through the window, revealing the fine lines of strain around his mouth, the shadow of beard upon his jaw. This was not the immaculate Duke she remembered from ballrooms and garden parties. This was a man who had travelled far and in haste. I fear I do not comprehend your meaning, Your Grace. Then I shall speak with greater clarity, Miss Aldermont. He took one step toward her, then halted, as if restrained by an invisible barrier. I am aware of your circumstances. I have come to offer a solution. A solution? Incredulity coloured her tone. Or a purchase, sir. The Duke's expression hardened. I offer marriage, Miss Aldermont, as I did once before. The grandfather clock ticked in the silence that followed, each second a small eternity. Why now? She finally whispered, her composure threatening to fracture. After all this time, why return when there is nothing left but my name? Because, he said, his gaze never wavering, it is your name that holds the value I failed to recognize. The rain intensified, drumming against the windows like impatient fingers. And if I refuse? Then I shall depart, he answered, but not before ensuring that this house and your dignity remain intact. As he spoke, a glove slipped from Lydia's grasp, falling to the floor between them, a small ivory barrier on the Aubusson carpet. Neither moved to retrieve it. Dawn broke over London with reluctant luminescence, piercing the fog in shafts of watery gold. The servants of Hartwick House moved with unusual purpose, their whispers forming an undercurrent of astonishment that flowed through the corridors. The Duke of Greystone had returned before breakfast, accompanied by his solicitor, a gesture that transformed rumour into incontrovertible fact. In the morning room, Lydia sat with perfect posture, her breakfast untouched, her gaze fixed upon the garden where frost still clung to the withered roses. Her night had passed without slumber, each hour spent in contemplation of Benedict Hawthorne's extraordinary proposition. The documents are prepared, Miss Aldermont, Mr. Graves, the Duke's solicitor, explained with meticulous precision. His Grace has arranged for all outstanding debts to be discharged forthwith. The deed to Hartwick House shall be transferred to your name exclusively, regardless of future arrangements. The implication hung in the air, like the lingering notes of a dirge. And what does His Grace require in exchange for this magnanimity? Lydia inquired, her voice betraying not a hint of the tempest within. The Duke himself answered, his tall figure silhouetted against the morning light. Your agreement to be my wife, announced publicly this very day. His tone was not that of a supplicant, but neither did it bear the imperious demand she had expected. The ban shall be read this Sunday at St. George's. You speak with remarkable assurance, Your Grace, Lydia observed, finally turning to face him. In daylight his countenance revealed the toll of his journey, the shadows beneath his eyes, the subtle strain about his mouth. Have you considered that I might prefer destitution to a union founded upon obligation? A muscle flexed in his jaw. I have considered every eventuality, Miss Aldermont, except perhaps my refusal. For the briefest moment, uncertainty flickered across his features, a revelation so startling that Lydia nearly gasped aloud. The Duke of Greystone uncertain? The notion defied comprehension. I would hear your refusal, should you wish to deliver it, he said at length, but I would ask that you first read this. From his coat, he withdrew a sealed letter bearing his family crest. The wax was unbroken, the paper of the finest quality. What is this? The letter I wrote to you 5 years ago but lacked the courage to send. Lydia's fingers trembled as she accepted the missive. And its contents? An explanation, not an excuse. She placed the letter upon the table, unread. I require neither, Your Grace. What transpired between us is consigned to history, yet history shapes our present, does it not? The Duke's voice softened, acquiring a timbre she had never before heard from him. Miss Aldermont, Lydia, I abandoned honor when I abandoned our understanding. I have returned not merely to offer restitution, but to beg forgiveness. The use of her Christian name, so intimate, so forbidden without the sanction of family or marriage, rendered her momentarily speechless. Mr. Graves cleared his throat delicately. Perhaps I might withdraw while you— No, Lydia interrupted, regaining her composure. Your presence is required, sir, for I wish to review these documents in their entirety. For 3 hours the morning room became a theatre of legal discourse. Lydia scrutinized each clause, each provision, with the acumen of a seasoned barrister. The Duke, seated opposite, watched her with an expression that vacillated between admiration and impatience. The terms are most generous, she conceded finally. Yet I must inquire, why such haste? Surely a proper engagement period would— Time, the Duke interjected, is a luxury we cannot afford. We, Your Grace? He rose and moved to the window, his tall frame rigid with a tension she could not decipher. The Tun is already astir with rumours of my arrival at your door. By nightfall, the gossip sheets will herald my return to London society after an extended absence. If we are to control the narrative, we must act decisively. The narrative? Lydia echoed, a bitter smile curving her lips. How pragmatic of you, sir. His shoulders stiffened. Pragmatism has governed my existence, Miss Aldermont. It is a habit not easily forsaken. And yet you crossed England in the dead of winter, uninvited and unexpected, to propose marriage to a spinster of diminished circumstances. She rose from her chair, facing him with quiet dignity. Forgive me if I find such behavior at odds with pragmatism. For a moment, the Duke appeared almost vulnerable, a state so at variance with his public persona that Lydia momentarily questioned her perception. Perhaps, he said quietly, I have grown weary of pragmatism's cold comfort. Before she could respond, a commotion at the front door interrupted their exchange. Margaret hurried into the room, her complexion flushed with agitation. Miss, forgive the intrusion, but Lady Vanessa Caldwell has arrived and insists upon an audience. She claims it is a matter of utmost urgency. The effect upon the Duke was immediate and profound. His expression hardened to marble, his posture tensed like a blade about to strike. Lady Vanessa, Lydia murmured, recognition dawning. The notorious beauty whose name had been linked with the Duke's in countless society columns, the woman rumoured to have captured the heart that Lydia had failed to touch. Show her to the drawing-room, Margaret. Inform her that I shall attend her shortly. Lydia, the Duke began, his use of her name still shocking in its intimacy. You need not— On the contrary, Your Grace, she interjected, gathering her skirts with calm determination. If I am to consider becoming your Duchess, I must begin as I mean to continue, facing whatever challenges present themselves with composure and dignity. A gleam of something akin to pride illuminated his severe features. Then permit me to accompany you. No, her refusal was gentle yet firm. This encounter must be mine alone. Lady Vanessa has not travelled across London to speak with you, but with me. As she moved toward the door, the Duke's voice halted her progress. Miss Aldermont. The formality had returned, yet something in his tone made her turn. You asked why such haste. The answer lies not in pragmatism, but in certainty. Certainty of what, sir? That each day spent apart is a day wasted. The morning sunlight caught the angles of his face, revealing not the fearsome Duke of reputation, but a man of flesh and blood, and unarticulated longing. For an instant, the years between them dissolved, and Lydia glimpsed the young gentleman who had once walked with her in her father's gardens, discussing literature and philosophy with unexpected passion. Then Lady Vanessa's melodious laughter drifted from the drawing-room, shattering the moment like crystal upon stone. Lady Vanessa Caldwell was a vision in periwinkle silk, her dark curls arranged in a cascade of studied elegance that framed her heart-shaped face to perfection. As Lydia entered the drawing-room, the younger woman rose from her seat with feline grace, her amber eyes assessing Lydia with a mixture of curiosity and calculation. Miss Aldermont, she purred, curtsying with flawless precision. How kind of you to receive me without prior notice. I do hope I am not interrupting anything of importance. Not at all, Lady Vanessa, Lydia responded, her own curtsy measured and correct. Hartwick House is honoured by your presence. How may I be of assistance? A smile played at the corners of Lady Vanessa's rosebud lips. My dear Miss Aldermont, it is I who wish to assist you. News travels with remarkable alacrity in London society, does it not? I could not help but hear of your unfortunate circumstances. Lydia gestured for her visitor to be seated once more, maintaining an expression of polite interest that betrayed none of the apprehension churning beneath her composed exterior. You are most considerate, my lady, though I confess some confusion as to the nature of the assistance you propose to offer. Lady Vanessa arranged her skirts with deliberate artistry. Information, Miss Aldermont, that most valuable of commodities. She withdrew a small fan from her reticule and opened it with a practiced flick of her wrist. I understand that the Duke of Greystone has returned to London. Indeed, Lydia's voice remained steady, giving nothing away. His Grace has business in the city, I believe. Business, Lady Vanessa repeated, the word dripping with insinuation. How fascinating. And does this business involve you, Miss Aldermont? The The direct nature of the inquiry violated every tenet of proper social discourse, yet Lydia recognized the strategic advantage in appearing unruffled. His Grace has kindly offered advice regarding certain financial matters. The connection between our families is long-standing, as you may be aware. Oh, I am aware of a great many things, my dear. Lady Vanessa's fan moved languidly before her face, a butterfly's wing concealing a serpent's smile, including the Duke's propensity for, shall we say, impulsive gestures of gallantry when confronted with distressed gentlewomen. The implication was unmistakable, yet Lydia refused to grant it acknowledgement. His Grace's reputation for fairness in business matters is well established, she responded mildly. Now, might I inquire as to the specific information you wish to impart? For an instant, something akin to respect flickered in Lady Vanessa's gaze, direct and unflappable. Perhaps I begin to understand his interest. She snapped her fan shut with a decisive click. Very well, Miss Aldermont, I shall speak plainly. The Duke's sudden reappearance in your life is not what it appears to be. And what does it appear to be, my lady? A romantic reconciliation? A noble rescue? A restoration of an understanding cruelly severed? Lady Vanessa laughed, the sound like silver bells with a discordant note. Whatever narrative you have constructed, I fear reality shall prove disappointing. Lydia folded her hands in her lap, the picture of serenity. You presume much regarding my expectations, Lady Vanessa. Do I? The younger woman leaned forward, her voice dropping to a confidential murmur. Then allow me to present facts rather than presumptions. The Duke departed for his northern estate 3 days ago, immediately after receiving a letter that bore the Aldermont seal. A cold weight settled in Lydia's stomach. I sent no such correspondence to His Grace. Of course you did not. Lady Vanessa's smile was triumphant. But someone wished him to believe you had. Someone who understood that Benedict Hawthorne, for all his fearsome reputation, harbors one fatal weakness, a sense of honor so rigid it borders on madness. The implications unfolded in Lydia's mind with terrible clarity. You suggest a manipulation. I state it outright. Lady Vanessa rose, moving to the window with sinuous elegance. The letter, bearing what appeared to be your handwriting, detailed your imminent financial ruin and imminent disgrace. It contained no plea for assistance. Indeed, it expressly forbade such intervention, making it a masterpiece of calculated restraint. And you possess this knowledge how? Precisely. Lady Vanessa turned, sunlight illuminating the perfection of her profile. Because, my dear Miss Aldermont, I wrote the letter myself. The admission, delivered with such casual arrogance, momentarily robbed Lydia of speech. When she found her voice again, it emerged with quiet steel. To what purpose, my lady? To prove a point. Lady Vanessa returned to her seat, leaning forward with conspiratorial intimacy. You see, I have spent the past year attempting to secure the Duke's hand in marriage. My beauty, my fortune, my impeccable lineage, all have failed to penetrate his armor of indifference, yet the mere suggestion of your distress propelled him across England without hesitation. Understanding dawned, cold and clarifying. You sought to determine his true feelings, and in doing so I have rendered us both a service. Lady Vanessa's smile held no warmth. Now we both know the truth. His offer to you stems not from love, but from guilt and obligation. A gentleman's misguided attempt to rectify a perceived failing. Lydia's thoughts raced, reassessing every word, every nuance of the Duke's behavior since his arrival. Had his intensity merely been the manifestation of a burdened conscience? His haste, the product of duty rather than desire? Why reveal this deception to me? She asked finally. Surely discretion would better serve your ambitions. Lady Vanessa sighed, a theatrical exhalation of feigned regret. Because, Miss Aldermont, despite my methods, I am not entirely without conscience. You deserve to know that any marriage founded upon such circumstances would be a hollow victory. The Duke would honor his vows, provide for your comfort, perhaps even treat you with kindness, but his heart would remain encased in ice. The grandfather clock in the hall chimed 11, its sonorous tones marking the passage of moments that seemed suspended in amber. Outside, a carriage clattered past, a mundane reminder that the world continued its rotation, despite the axis-shifting revelations within these walls. I appreciate your candor, Lady Vanessa, Lydia said at length, rising with quiet dignity. You have given me much to consider. The younger woman stood, gathering her reticule with an air of satisfaction. Then my conscience is clear. I wish you wisdom in your deliberations, Miss Aldermont. She moved toward the door, then paused, glancing back with calculated casualness. Oh, and should you decide to decline the Duke's offer, I would be most grateful if you would inform him of my impending departure for Bath. The waters are said to be particularly efficacious this season. After Lady Vanessa's departure, Lydia remained motionless in the centre of the drawing-room, her mind a tumult of conflicting emotions. The unsealed letter from the Duke still lay upon the table in the morning-room, its contents promising explanations for past abandonment. Now a new question demanded consideration. Was his return merely the product of manipulation, a puppet's dance orchestrated by a skilled practitioner of social scheming? The sound of approaching footsteps roused her from contemplation. The Duke himself appeared in the doorway, his expression guarded. "She has departed?" he inquired, his gaze searching Lydia's face for clues to the conversation's nature. "Yes." Lydia moved to the window, needing distance to maintain composure. Lady Vanessa was most enlightening. The Duke's silence spoke volumes. When Lydia turned to face him again, she found him watching her with an intensity that threatened to unravel her carefully constructed facade of calm. "Miss Aldermont," he began, his voice unnaturally formal, "whatever Lady Vanessa imparted, I must insist." "She confessed to forgery," Lydia interrupted, her tone level despite the tremor in her hands. "A letter, bearing my seal and what appeared to be my hand, detailing circumstances of financial distress." The colour drained from the Duke's face, leaving his countenance as pale as carved marble. "I see. Do you?" Lydia took a step toward him, emboldened by a strange amalgam of hurt and clarity. "She claims this deception was designed to test your regard for me, or rather, to confirm its absence, to prove that your response was born of obligation rather than affection. And you believe this interpretation?" His voice was dangerously quiet. "I believe that Lady Vanessa orchestrated this scenario," Lydia responded carefully. "What I do not yet know is whether her assessment of your motivations holds truth." The Duke moved further into the room, his powerful frame seeming to diminish the space around him. "Then permit me to enlighten you, as Lady Vanessa so kindly attempted to do." The edge in his voice could have cut glass. "Yes, I received a letter purporting to be from you. Yes, it detailed circumstances of financial hardship. And yes, I departed for London without delay upon reading its contents." "As honour demanded," Lydia supplied, unable to disguise the note of resignation in her tone. "No." The single syllable resonated through the room like the toll of a bell. "Not as honour demanded, Miss Aldermont, as my heart commanded." The confession hung in the air between them, an invisible thread of vulnerability from the man England deemed impenetrable. Lydia's breath caught in her throat, her practiced composure momentarily abandoning her. "Your heart," she echoed, the words barely audible above the gentle ticking of the mantel clock. "After 5 years of silence, Your Grace, I find such declarations difficult to reconcile with your prior conduct." The Duke moved to the fireplace, his reflection fragmenting in the ornate mirror above. "As do I, Miss Aldermont. Believe me when I say that no one has been a harsher judge of my actions than myself." His knuckles whitened as he gripped the mantelpiece. The letter, forged though it was, merely provided the impetus for a journey long contemplated, yet never undertaken, Lydia observed, her tone neither accusatory nor forgiving, but weighted with the gravity of historical fact. "A failing for which I have no adequate explanation." He turned to face her, his countenance a battlefield of restraint and raw emotion. "I offer no excuses, only the truth as it stands. I have thought of you, Miss Aldermont, with increasing frequency and deepening regret with each passing season." The grandfather clock in the hall chimed the half-hour, a sonorous reminder that beyond these walls, London continued its relentless social machinations. Somewhere in Mayfair, Lady Vanessa would be relating her morning's triumph to select confidants. "Your Grace," Lydia began, folding her hands to disguise their subtle trembling, "I appreciate your candor. However, our past cannot be amended by mere declarations, however sincerely delivered. The circumstances of our present situation remain unchanged. Your arrival was precipitated by deceit, and any decisions made under such conditions would be fundamentally unsound." Benedict Hawthorne, the Duke of Greystone, feared throughout Parliament and respected across continents, looked momentarily uncertain, an expression so at odds with his public persona that Lydia found herself transfixed. "Then what would you have of me, Lydia?" The informal address returned, a deliberate intimacy that sent a tremor through her composure. "Shall I depart, leaving your situation unresolved? Or shall I remain, proving through sustained action what words cannot convey?" Before she could formulate a response, Margaret appeared at the doorway, her expression apologetic yet urgent. "Forgive the intrusion, miss, but Mr. Finch has returned with representatives from Harding and Sons Bank. They insist upon immediate audience." The colour drained from Lydia's face. Harding and Sons, the final creditor, holder of the mortgage on Hartwick House. Their appearance could signify only one development. The foreclosure had begun. "Show them to the library," she instructed, her voice remarkably steady despite the earthquake beneath her feet. "Inform them. I shall attend them directly." As Margaret withdrew, the Duke's expression hardened to granite. "This is Lady Vanessa's doing," he stated, the words carved from ice. "She has accelerated the proceedings to force your hand." "Perhaps," Lydia conceded, gathering her dignity like armor. "Regardless, the matter must be addressed. Allow me to accompany you." "I think not, Your Grace." She straightened her spine, every inch the daughter of generations of Aldermonts who had faced adversity without flinching. "I shall confront my creditors with the composure befitting my station." His expression softened momentarily. "Your courage does you credit, Miss Aldermont. However, I must insist upon being present, not as your champion, but as an interested party in these negotiations." The library, once her father's sanctuary, now resembled a tribunal. Mr. Finch stood beside two gentlemen whose immaculate tailoring and cold eyes identified them as banking representatives more clearly than any introduction. On the mahogany table lay an array of documents, their red seals like drops of blood upon parchment. "Miss Aldermont," Mr. Finch began, his tone carefully modulated to convey regret without genuine sympathy. "Circumstances have necessitated an acceleration of the foreclosure process. Harding and Sons require immediate settlement or possession of the property by tomorrow's end." "Tomorrow?" Lydia's composure wavered momentarily. The original agreement provided a fortnight. "New information regarding the property's condition has come to light," one of the bankers interjected, his voice as thin and sharp as a paper cut. "Structural deficiencies that significantly reduce its value as collateral." "Falsehoods," the Duke stated, entering the room with the quiet menace of a gathering storm. His presence altered the atmosphere instantly. The bankers straightened, recognition and wariness flashing across their features. "Gentlemen, you will forgive my intrusion, but I believe I have relevant interest in these proceedings." Mr. Finch blanched. "Your Grace, we had no knowledge of your involvement, evidently." The Duke's tone could have frosted glass. "Perhaps you might enlighten me as to which structural engineer provided this convenient assessment." The bankers exchanged glances rife with discomfort. "The report was commissioned internally, Your Grace." "Indeed. How fortuitous that such concerns manifested precisely when Miss Aldermont's vulnerability reached its apex." The Duke moved to the table, examining the documents with practiced ease. "I shall require copies of this engineering assessment by day's end. My own experts will conduct a comparative evaluation." "Your Grace," the elder banker protested, "standard banking procedures do not interest me," the Duke completed, his voice dangerously soft. "What does interest me, however, is the sudden involvement of Harding and Sons in this matter, when the mortgage was previously held by Weatherby Trust. A curious transfer, occurring only yesterday, if my information is correct." The silence that followed confirmed his assertion more effectively than any verbal acknowledgement. "You may inform your principals," the Duke continued, "that Greystone Holdings has extended an offer to purchase Hartwick House at a price considerably above its market valuation. The necessary drafts shall be delivered to your offices before close of business today." The transformation in the banker's demeanor was immediate and profound. Backs straightened, expressions shifted from predatory to deferential with the fluidity of accomplished courtiers. "Of course, Your Grace. We shall convey your generous offer without delay." Throughout this exchange, Lydia had remained silent, observing with a mixture of astonishment and growing unease. As the bankers gathered their papers with newfound deference, she found her voice. "Gentlemen," she addressed them, her tone crystal and commanding, "regardless of His Grace's intervention, I wish to review the full accounting of my father's obligations. Every debt, every interest calculation, every transaction dating to the initial mortgage. I shall expect these records delivered to my solicitor by tomorrow noon." The elder banker blinked in surprise, then offered a stiff bow. "As you wish, Miss Aldermont." After their departure, silence claimed the library. Lydia stood by the window, watching as the bankers entered their carriage, their postures still rigid with the aftershocks of the Duke's intervention. "So you exceeded your authority, Your Grace," she said finally, turning to face him. "Hartwick House is not yours to purchase." "No," he agreed, meeting her gaze steadily. "It is yours to keep." "I beg your pardon?" "The purchase shall be executed in your name alone," he clarified. "The deed transferred to your exclusive possession, free of encumbrance or condition." Lydia's composure faltered. "I cannot accept such generosity without—" "It is not generosity, Miss Aldermont." His interruption was gentle but firm. "It is restoration of what should never have been jeopardized." "And what do you expect in return for this restoration?" she asked, the question unavoidable despite its impropriety. The Duke's expression remained unreadable. I expect nothing. I hope for everything. The distinction is crucial. Before Lydia could formulate a response, Margaret appeared once more, her expression now one of unmistakable alarm. Miss, forgive me, but there is a situation requiring immediate attention. Lady Caroline's carriage has arrived. Caroline? Lydia's composure cracked, genuine shock registering in her voice. My sister is here? Yes, miss, and she is distressed. The Duke's posture tensed. Perhaps I should withdraw? No, Lydia decided, surprising herself with the speed of her response. Whatever storm approaches, Your Grace, I find I would prefer to weather it with an ally present. His eyes widened fractionally at the word ally, a small concession yet monumental in its implications. With a nod of understanding, he followed her from the library to confront this newest complication in a day already fraught with revelations. Lady Caroline Aldermont Pembroke swept into the drawing room like an embodiment of fashionable distress, her travelling costume of midnight blue silk rustling dramatically with each agitated movement. At 25, she was the eldest of Lydia's younger sisters, beautiful, impetuous, and accustomed to commanding attention in any gathering. Lydia, she exclaimed, rushing forward with outstretched hands. Is it true? The whispers have reached even Richmond. Hartwick House to be seized, our family name once more dragged through scandal's mire. Her perfectly arranged curls trembled with emotion beneath her plumed hat. Why did you not send word? Before Lydia could respond, Caroline's gaze shifted beyond her sister's shoulder, widening in recognition. Your Grace, she gasped, dropping into a hasty curtsy. I had no notion, that is, no one informed me of your presence in London, much less at Hartwick House. Lady Caroline, the Duke acknowledged with a formal bow. Your surprise is understandable. My return to town was not widely heralded. Caroline's quick eyes darted between them, the machinery of speculation visibly whirring behind her porcelain features. I see, she murmured, though clearly she did not. How fortuitous that you should be present during my sister's tribulations. Indeed, Lydia interjected, guiding Caroline to a seat with gentle firmness. Now, dear one, pray compose yourself and explain your unexpected arrival. Is Lord Pembroke aware of your journey to town? A flicker of discomfort crossed Caroline's lovely countenance. Frederick is attending to business in Bristol. I left a note explaining my departure. She waved a gloved hand dismissively. But that is immaterial. Lydia, why have you not appealed to your family in this crisis? Frederick's resources are his own, Lydia completed firmly. Your husband's generosity has been demonstrated amply in the past. I would not presume upon it further. But surely the matter is resolving itself, Lydia assured her, casting a meaningful glance toward the Duke. There is no cause for continued alarm. Caroline's gaze followed her sister's, comprehension dawning with theatrical slowness. Oh, I understand completely. Her voice dropped to a stage whisper that nevertheless remained perfectly audible. His Grace has intervened on your behalf. How gallant, how utterly romantic. The Duke cleared his throat, discomfort evident in his rigid posture. Lady Caroline, your sister's circumstances will be the subject of every drawing-room conversation from Mayfair to Richmond by week's end, Caroline completed, her enthusiasm mounting visibly. The Duke of Greystone returning after years abroad to rescue the woman he once... She halted abruptly, belatedly recognizing the impropriety of her speculation. Caroline, Lydia admonished gently, your imagination races ahead of discretion. Forgive me, her sister responded, not appearing particularly penitent. But you must admit, Lydia, the tableau you present invites speculation of the most delicious variety. The fearsome Duke, the steadfast spinster. Lady Caroline, the Duke interrupted, his tone edged with steel. I would caution against employing such terminology regarding your sister. Caroline blinked in surprise at his rebuke. Then a slow smile curved her lips. I stand corrected, Your Grace, and instructed. She turned back to Lydia, her expression shifting to one of earnest concern. In all seriousness, dearest, what of Papa's debts? The rumors suggest they are substantial. They are being addressed, Lydia answered, unwilling to divulge particulars that would inevitably travel back to Caroline's husband and in-laws. You need not trouble yourself with the details. But I must know something, Caroline insisted. After all, Elizabeth and Georgiana will inquire the moment I return to Richmond. What shall I tell them? The Duke exchanged a glance with Lydia, an unspoken communication passing between them. She gave an almost imperceptible nod, granting permission for a measured disclosure. You may inform your sisters, the Duke stated, "that Miss Aldermont and I have reached an understanding regarding the Aldermont estate. Hartwick House shall remain in her possession, and all outstanding obligations will be settled forthwith." Caroline's eyes widened, her quick mind calculating implications. "An understanding," she repeated, the phrase weighted with insinuation. "Of what nature, precisely?" "Caroline," Lydia admonished more firmly. "Oh, very well." Caroline sighed dramatically, then brightened. "But you will attend the Wintertons' assembly next week, will you not? Both of you. It would be the perfect opportunity to present your understanding to society." The Duke stiffened visibly. "I had not planned to participate in the season's social calendar." "But you must," Caroline insisted, warming to her self-appointed role as architect of their social re-emergence. "The Ton has been positively moribund without your formidable presence, Your Grace. And Lydia has sequestered herself far too long in this mausoleum of a house." She reached for her sister's hand, squeezing it with genuine affection. "Please say you'll come." "For me?" Lydia recognized the familiar pattern, Caroline's strategic deployment of sisterly devotion to achieve her aims. Yet beneath the manipulation lay genuine concern, and perhaps a touch of loneliness that her marriage, for all its material advantages, had not entirely assuaged. "I shall consider it," Lydia conceded, earning a delighted squeal from her sister. "Excellent, I shall inform Lady Winterton immediately." Caroline rose in a flurry of expensive fabric, seemingly rejuvenated by this new project. "Now I must depart. Frederick expects me returned by evening, and the roads are abominable after yesterday's rain." She kissed Lydia's cheek, then performed an elegant curtsy to the Duke. "Your Grace, I entrust my beloved sister to your care. Do not disappoint me." The admonition, delivered with a smile but undergirded with genuine warning, drew a surprised arch of the Duke's eyebrow. "I shall endeavor to merit your confidence, Lady Caroline." After her departure, as whirlwind-like as her arrival, a contemplative silence descended upon the drawing-room. Lydia moved to the window, watching as her sister's ornate carriage pulled away from Hartwick House. "Caroline has always possessed a talent for dramatic entrances and exits," she observed, a fond smile softening her features. "One might almost believe she orchestrates inclement weather and inconvenient timing purely for theatrical effect." The Duke's reflection appeared in the window pane beside hers, his expression thoughtful. "She possesses remarkable perception beneath the social frivolity." "Indeed. Caroline sees more than she reveals, though her discretion is sometimes overwhelmed by her enthusiasm." Lydia turned to face him directly. "She will spread word of your presence here throughout Richmond and London by nightfall. Does that concern you?" "It should," she acknowledged. "Once Caroline disseminates her romantic interpretation of our understanding, retracting or clarifying it would prove difficult without considerable social damage." The Duke stepped closer, his gaze intent upon her face. "Then perhaps we should ensure her interpretation holds truth." Lydia's breath caught. "Your Grace, Benedict," he corrected gently. "If we are to attend the Wintertons' assembly as a united presence, surely such formality between us becomes excessive." "You wish to attend, then?" Lydia asked, genuine surprise coloring her tone. "I had thought you averse to such gatherings." "I am." His admission came with a rueful smile that transformed his severe countenance, rendering it momentarily boyish. "However, I find that certain sacrifices become insignificant when weighed against greater purposes." "And what purpose would justify enduring an evening of Lady Winterton's notorious musical selections and tepid lemonade?" The Duke, Benedict, reached into his waistcoat and withdrew a small object, extending it toward her on his open palm. Lydia gasped softly. There, nestled against the black leather of his glove, lay a ring of extraordinary craftsmanship, a sapphire of deepest azure surrounded by diamonds that caught the afternoon light like captured stars. "This belonged to my grandmother," he explained, his voice roughened with an emotion Lydia could not quite identify. "It has adorned the hand of every Duchess of Greystone for 5 generations. It is magnificent," Lydia whispered, unable to tear her gaze from the jewel. "It awaits its next guardian," Benedict continued, his eyes never leaving her face. "I had intended a more formal presentation after matters with your creditors were fully resolved. However, Caroline's intervention has perhaps accelerated certain considerations." Lydia raised her eyes to his, searching for answers to questions she scarcely dared formulate. "You cannot mean—" "I can, and I do." He took her hand, the contact sending a tremor through her composure. "Lydia Aldermont, I ask not for immediate acceptance, but for permission to court you openly, with honorable intentions fully declared before society." The world seemed to narrow to the space between them, all external considerations momentarily suspended. 5 years of silence, of dignity maintained through isolation, of quiet resignation to spinsterhood, all challenged by this unexpected second chance. "Your grandmother's ring," she said finally, her voice steadier than she had anticipated, "should be presented only when both giver and recipient are certain of their hearts." Benedict's expression shifted, vulnerability briefly visible beneath his composed exterior. "And what would constitute such certainty in your estimation?" "Time," Lydia answered simply, not rushing headlong into declarations born of crisis or convenience. "We have been strangers to one another for half a decade, sir. Becoming reacquainted seems a necessary precursor to more binding arrangements." He considered her words, then nodded slowly, returning the ring to his waistcoat. "A measured approach. I should have expected no less from you, Lydia." His use of her name still sent a small shock through her system. "Then let us begin with the Wintertons' assembly. Will you permit me to escort you?" "Yes," she replied, surprising herself with the readiness of her acceptance. "Though I must warn you, I have not danced in many years." A genuine smile transformed his features. "Nor have I. We shall be well matched in our rustiness." As the afternoon light began its golden descent toward evening, they stood in companionable silence, contemplating the strange path that had led them to this moment of tentative new beginning. Outside, London continued its eternal bustle, unaware that within these walls a dormant hope had begun to stir after years of winter sleep. The Wintertons' assembly rooms blazed with candlelight, each crystal chandelier a constellation illuminating the cream of London society. Lydia entered on Benedict's arm, her gown of silver-blue silk rustling softly with each step. She had chosen the garment with deliberate care, elegant enough to honor the occasion, yet restrained enough to avoid any suggestion of triumphalism. The single adornment at her throat, a modest sapphire pendant that had belonged to her mother, complemented rather than competed with the magnificence of her escort. Their entrance caused a ripple of reaction across the assembled guests. Conversations faltered, fans fluttered with increased vigor, and necks craned for better vantage. The Duke of Greystone, returning to society after years of self-imposed exile, would alone have constituted the evening's most noteworthy development. His appearance escorting Miss Lydia Aldermont, a lady long absent from fashionable gatherings, whose family name had weathered considerable scandal, transformed mere gossip into social sensation. "Every eye in the room observes us," Lydia murmured, maintaining a serene smile despite the fluttering of anxiety in her chest. "I had not anticipated quite such an attentive audience." Benedict's hand covered hers where it rested upon his arm, a gesture of reassurance that did not go unnoticed by nearby observers. "Let them look," he replied, his voice pitched for her ears alone. "Their curiosity is the price of re-entry into these hallowed circles." Lady Winterton descended upon them with the determined hospitality of a general securing strategic positions. "Your Grace, Miss Aldermont, how utterly delightful that you have honored our modest gathering." Her smile stretched wide enough to reveal a concerning number of teeth. "We are positively agog at your unexpected appearance." "Lady Winterton," Benedict acknowledged, with perfect civility, executing a bow of precisely calibrated depth, respectful without being deferential. "Your reputation for exemplary entertainments drew us from seclusion." The hyperbole, delivered with such conviction that it almost sounded sincere, visibly delighted their hostess. "You are too kind, Your Grace." "And Miss Aldermont," her gaze swept Lydia's figure with practiced assessment, "how refreshing to see you among us once more. Your sister, Lady Caroline, informed me of your renewed participation in society's pleasures." Her optimism occasionally precedes reality, Lydia responded with gentle humor. However, on this occasion she prophesied correctly. Lady Winterton tittered, her fan working vigorously. "Charming, simply charming. You must allow me to reacquaint you with certain personages who have inquired after your welfare." She gestured toward a cluster of matrons whose expressions suggested predatory interest rather than benevolent concern. "Lady Harrington in particular has expressed the keenest interest in your situation." "Perhaps later," Benedict interjected smoothly. "I have promised Miss Aldermont the first waltz, and I believe the orchestra prepares to commence." Indeed, the musicians had begun the preliminary tuning that heralded the evening's first dance. Lady Winterton, recognizing dismissal despite its polite delivery, inclined her head. "Of course, Your Grace, the floor awaits your distinguished presence." As she withdrew to oversee some fresh crisis of hospitality, Lydia exhaled softly. A masterful evasion, sir. I confess I had dreaded Lady Harrington's particular brand of solicitous interrogation. The benefits of a fearsome reputation, Benedict replied, his eyes warming with unexpected humor. Even the most determined social tacticians hesitate to press their advantage too forcefully. A useful attribute in these waters, Lydia agreed, surveying the room with renewed appreciation for her escort's protective presence. The orchestra struck the opening chords of the waltz, and Benedict led her to the center of the floor. As they took position, his hand at her waist, hers resting lightly upon his shoulder, a circle of space seemed to form around them, as if the other dancers instinctively granted them room for this public reconciliation. "You mentioned you had not danced in years," Benedict reminded her as they began the first steps, "yet you move with perfect grace." "The body remembers what the mind might prefer to forget," Lydia responded, surprised by how naturally they fell into rhythm together, though I confess to practicing the basic steps yesterday afternoon when the house was quiet. The image of her rehearsing alone in preparation for this evening touched something in Benedict's expression. "Your dedication to perfection remains unchanged, I see." "Not perfection," she corrected gently. "Adequacy. I would not have you embarrassed by a partner who trod upon your boots before all of London society." "An unlikely scenario," he assured her, guiding her through a turn with effortless precision, "though I would suffer crushed toes with equanimity if it meant holding you thus." The unexpected sentiment, delivered in his customarily grave tone, brought warmth to Lydia's cheeks. "Your grace becomes poetic. I had not anticipated such transformation." "Benedict," he reminded her, his voice dropping lower, "and poetry seems the natural language when traditional discourse proves insufficient." As they circled the floor, Lydia became aware of a particular quality of attention directed toward them, speculative, assessing, calculating. Near the punch table, Lady Vanessa Caldwell stood in resplendent crimson, her expression a study in thwarted ambition as she observed their dance. "Your former admirer appears displeased by our display," Lydia observed, unable to completely suppress a note of satisfaction. Benedict's gaze remained fixed upon her face, deliberately avoiding looking toward Lady Vanessa. "She is of no consequence. Her machinations brought you to my door," Lydia reminded him. "For that, at least, I suppose we owe her some measure of gratitude." "I prefer to credit fate rather than manipulation," he countered, executing another perfect turn, "though I admit her forgery accelerated a journey too long delayed." The music swelled, and for several measures they danced in companionable silence, each absorbing the strange reality of their public re-emergence. Lydia found herself studying Benedict's features with new attention, the strong line of his jaw, the subtle creases at the corners of his eyes that appeared when his expression softened, the intensity of his gaze that seemed to perceive beyond surface appearances. "You are staring, Miss Aldermont," he observed, a hint of amusement lightening his tone. "I am reconciling memory with present reality," she replied honestly. "The man before me bears both familiar and unfamiliar aspects. 5 years have wrought changes in us both. Indeed they have, yet certain essentials remain constant." The waltz approached its conclusion, and he drew her infinitesimally closer, still entirely proper, yet intimate enough to convey significance. "Your courage, your dignity, your unfailing sense of what is right, even when convention dictates otherwise." The music ended, and they separated with appropriate formality, bowing and curtsying as protocol demanded. Yet something had shifted between them during those moments of synchronized movement, a reconnection that transcended the orchestrated social performance surrounding them. As Benedict escorted her from the floor, they were immediately beset by curious well-wishers and reintroductions. Lydia navigated the social gauntlet with practiced composure, accepting both genuine warmth and thinly veiled inquisitiveness with equal grace. Benedict remained steadfastly at her side, his formidable presence deterring the most brazen inquiries regarding their relationship. During a momentary respite, as Benedict was engaged in reluctant conversation with a former parliamentary colleague, Caroline materialized at Lydia's elbow, her expression triumphant. "You are the sensation of the evening," she declared, linking her arm through her sister's and drawing her slightly aside. "Every matron in London is recalculating matrimonial prospects and revising guest lists as we speak. The Duke of Greystone, returning to society with the eldest Aldermont sister as his chosen companion. It is deliciously dramatic." "Your enthusiasm exceeds the circumstances," Lydia cautioned, though she could not entirely suppress a smile at her sister's exuberance. "His Grace has merely offered escort for this one occasion," Caroline's knowing look bordered on impertinence. "The Duke does not escort ladies to assemblies without significant intention, Lydia. His reputation for avoiding such gatherings is legendary." She leaned closer, lowering her voice to a conspiratorial whisper. "Tell me truthfully, has he presented you with the Greystone sapphire? I have heard it is magnificent beyond description." Lydia's momentary hesitation betrayed her, and Caroline's eyes widened in delighted triumph. "He has. Oh, Lydia, when is the announcement to be made? Does Lady Augusta approve? Will the ceremony be at St. George's or—" "Caroline," Lydia interrupted firmly, "your imagination gallops ahead of reality. No formal arrangement exists between His Grace and myself. We are becoming reacquainted after a lengthy separation." Her sister's expression remained skeptical. Reacquainted, with a sapphire the size of a robin's egg as conversational aid. Before Lydia could formulate a suitably tempered response, a sudden hush fell over the nearby guests. She turned to find Lady Vanessa approaching with deliberate grace, her crimson gown a declaration of war amid the pastel hues favored by the other ladies present. "Miss Aldermont," Lady Vanessa purred, executing a curtsy of mathematical precision. "How lovely to see you emerged from seclusion. The ton has been positively bereft without your—" She paused delicately, steadying influence. "Lady Vanessa," Lydia acknowledged with equal formality. "How kind of you to say so, though I suspect society has managed admirably in my absence." "Indeed, we have endeavored to persevere," Lady Vanessa agreed, her smile sharp as a stiletto, "though certain gentlemen have been notably absent from our circles as well. His Grace appears in remarkable form this evening, does he not? One would hardly suspect his recent exertions." The insinuation hung in the air between them, its implications clear to all within earshot. Caroline's grip on Lydia's arm tightened in warning or support, perhaps both. "The Duke's vigor has always been exemplary," Lydia responded, her tone pleasant but firm, "as has his sense of timing." Lady Vanessa's perfect features arranged themselves into an expression of exaggerated concern. "I do hope his sudden return to London has not proved too disruptive to your quiet routines, Miss Aldermont. Men of his position often fail to consider the consequences of their impulsive actions upon those of more delicate circumstances." The surrounding listeners held collective breath, recognizing the expert deployment of social weaponry. Caroline tensed beside Lydia, preparing for sisterly defense, but Lydia's gentle pressure on her arm counseled restraint. "On the contrary, Lady Vanessa," Lydia replied, her voice carrying with unexpected clarity, "I have found that men of true consequence consider their actions with exceptional care, particularly when those actions affect the welfare of others. It is one of the many qualities that distinguishes genuine nobility from mere title." A ripple of reaction passed through the observers, appreciative murmurs, quickly suppressed smiles, the subtle shifting of allegiances that constituted the invisible architecture of society. Lady Vanessa's composure faltered momentarily, her practiced smile flickering like a candle in a draught. Before she could marshal a counter-response, Benedict materialized at Lydia's side, his timing impeccable. "Miss Aldermont, I believe the next dance is about to commence." "Lady Vanessa," he acknowledged with minimal courtesy. "Good evening." The carriage journey from the Wintertons' assembly back to Hartwick House passed in contemplative silence, the rhythmic clatter of hooves upon cobblestones providing a steady counterpoint to Lydia's tumultuous thoughts. The evening had progressed beyond all expectation. Her reintroduction to society, facilitated by Benedict's formidable presence, had transformed what might have been an ordeal of whispers and sidelong glances into something approaching triumph. "You are unusually quiet," Benedict observed, his voice gentle in the darkness of the carriage interior. The passing street lamps cast intermittent illumination across his features, revealing an expression of watchful concern. "Has the evening taxed your strength beyond measure?" Lydia turned from her contemplation of rain-slicked streets to meet his gaze. "Not taxed, precisely. Rather, it has given me much to consider." She adjusted her shawl, a gesture born of thoughtfulness rather than discomfort. "I had forgotten the peculiar alchemy of such gatherings, how quickly alliances form and dissolve, how a single exchange can alter one's standing in the estimation of observers. Your exchange with Lady Vanessa, you mean?" It was not a question. "You handled her provocations with remarkable grace." "Grace born of necessity," Lydia acknowledged with a small smile. "When one lacks the armaments of youth, beauty, or fortune, one must deploy dignity and composure as alternative weapons." Benedict's expression darkened. "You undervalue yourself, Lydia. Your composure tonight did not merely deflect Lady Vanessa's barbs, it exposed the hollowness of her own position. The contrast was illuminating for many present." The carriage turned onto Hartwick Lane, the familiar surroundings visible through rain-streaked windows. In the week since Benedict's unexpected arrival, subtle changes had manifested throughout the modest house and its environs. Fresh gravel upon the drive, newly polished brass upon the door, a general atmosphere of revival rather than resignation. Though Lydia had initially resisted his intervention in her affairs, the tangible improvements could not be denied. "I received a communication from Mr. Graves this afternoon," she ventured, as the carriage slowed before Hartwick House. "He informs me that the transfer of deed is complete. The house is now legally mine, free of encumbrance." Benedict nodded, satisfaction evident in the set of his shoulders. "As it should be. Your father's creditors have been satisfied in full, and provisions made to prevent future entanglements. Your generosity is overwhelming," Lydia said softly. "I find myself uncertain how to properly express gratitude for such substantial intervention. Gratitude is unnecessary between us." He leaned forward slightly, his gaze intent upon her face. "What transpired was not charity, Lydia, but restitution. Had I honored our initial understanding 5 years ago, none of these difficulties would have befallen you." The carriage halted, and the footman appeared to open the door. Rain fell in a gentle curtain beyond the conveyance's shelter, lending the moment an air of suspended intimacy. Benedict descended first, then extended his hand to assist Lydia. As her fingers met his, even through the barrier of their gloves, she felt the same inexplicable current of recognition that had surprised her during their waltz. "You need not accompany me to the door," she said, aware of propriety's demands, even as she found herself reluctant to end their evening. "The hour grows late, and the rain is of no consequence," Benedict completed, unfurling a large black umbrella with practiced efficiency. "I shall see you safely to your threshold, Miss Aldermont, as any gentleman would." The short walk from carriage to doorway became a strangely significant journey beneath the shared shelter of the umbrella, their proximity necessitated by practicality, yet charged with unacknowledged awareness. When they reached the portico, protected from the elements by its stone canopy, Benedict lowered the umbrella, droplets cascading from its edges like liquid crystal. "Thank you for this evening," Lydia said, searching for words adequate to the complexity of her feelings. "For your escort, your protection, she hesitated, "your partnership in navigating treacherous social waters." "The pleasure was mine," he responded, his formal words softened by the warmth in his voice, "though I must confess to selfishness in my motives." "Selfishness?" "Indeed." The hint of a smile touched his lips. "I found myself unwilling to surrender your company to others, even when protocol demanded otherwise." The confession, delivered with such uncharacteristic openness, momentarily robbed Lydia of response. Before she could gather her composure, the door opened to reveal Margaret, her expression a mixture of relief and curiosity. "Miss Lydia, I was growing concerned at the lateness of the hour." Her gaze shifted to Benedict, and she dipped into a hasty curtsy. "Your Grace." "Good evening, Margaret," Benedict acknowledged with formal courtesy. "Please forgive our delayed return. The assembly proved more engaging than anticipated." Margaret's perceptive eyes noted the proximity of their figures beneath the portico, the lingering awareness evident in their postures. "I'll have hot chocolate prepared directly, miss," she offered, a knowing smile briefly illuminating her features. "And perhaps some for his Grace before his return journey. The night grows chill with the rain." The invitation, coming from a servant rather than the mistress of the house, might have constituted impropriety in other circumstances, yet in this moment it seemed a natural extension of the evening's gradual dissolution of formal barriers. "That is most kind, Margaret," Benedict replied, before Lydia could formulate a response. "However, I must decline. There are matters requiring my attention at Greystone House before morning." He turned to Lydia, his expression softening. "With your permission, I shall call tomorrow afternoon. There are certain developments regarding your father's former properties in Somerset that warrant discussion." "Of course," Lydia agreed, recognizing the statement as both genuine and a graceful pretext for continued association. "I shall be available from 2 o'clock onward." Benedict took her gloved hand, bowing over it with formal precision that nevertheless conveyed deeper sentiment. "Until tomorrow, then." He hesitated, then added in a lower tone meant only for her ears, "Sleep well, Lydia." After his departure, Lydia stood in the entrance hall, absently removing her evening gloves as Margaret helped divest her of her damp cloak. The house seemed simultaneously more substantial and more alive than it had in years, as if Benedict's presence had awakened it from prolonged dormancy. "His Grace seems most attentive, miss," Margaret observed, with the privileged familiarity of long service. Lady Caroline's letter suggested as much, but seeing it with my own eyes, she shook her head in wondering approval. The entire household staff speaks of nothing else. Lydia sighed, accustomed to the domestic grapevine that functioned with greater efficiency than any telegraph. The Duke's involvement in our affairs is primarily one of business and restitution, Margaret. Speculation beyond those parameters serves little purpose. The maid's expression remained knowing but respectful. As you say, miss, though if I might be so bold, business rarely brings such light to a gentleman's eyes when he looks upon his associate. Before Lydia could formulate a suitable rejoinder, a sharp knock at the front door startled them both. Margaret hastened to answer it, revealing a rain-drenched messenger boy clutching a small package wrapped in oilcloth. "Delivery for Miss Aldermont," the boy announced, his voice cracking with adolescence. "Most urgent from His Grace the Duke of Greystone." Puzzled, Lydia accepted the package, pressing a coin into the boy's cold hand. "Wait in the kitchen for the rain to slacken," she instructed. "Mrs. Timmins will provide hot soup to ward off chill." The grateful messenger dispatched to the warmth below stairs, Lydia carefully unwrapped the oilcloth package. Inside lay a small velvet box and a folded note bearing Benedict's bold handwriting. With fingers that betrayed uncharacteristic uncertainty, she opened the message first. "What was forgotten is now remembered. What was lost is now restored. Until tomorrow, B." The velvet box revealed its contents with a soft creak of hinges. Nestled against dark satin lay a lady's glove of ivory kid, delicate and slightly yellowed with age. Lydia gasped in recognition. It was her own glove, the one she had dropped during their final encounter 5 years prior, when his withdrawal from their understanding had shattered her carefully constructed expectations for the future. He had kept it. Through 5 years of absence, through continental travel and parliamentary obligations, through all manner of circumstance and change, Benedict Hawthorne had preserved this single, seemingly inconsequential token of their sundered connection. "Miss?" Margaret inquired, concerned by her mistress's prolonged silence. "Is aught amiss?" "No," Lydia whispered, carefully closing the box around its precious cargo. "Nothing is amiss. Rather, something long misplaced has been returned to where it belongs." That night, as rain drummed against the window panes of her bedchamber, Lydia sat before her dressing table, the velvet box open beside her hairbrush. The returned glove represented more than a sentimental gesture. It constituted a declaration of intent, spanning years of separation, a silent testament to regret and remembrance that no verbal profession could equal in eloquence. For the first time in half a decade, Lydia Aldermont permitted herself to contemplate a future not defined by sacrifice and solitary dignity, but by the possibility of shared purpose and belated joy. The sensation was simultaneously exhilarating and terrifying. Hope, after all, created vulnerability, where resignation had constructed fortress walls. The clock chimed midnight as she finally retired, the velvet box placed carefully upon her bedside table. Tomorrow would bring Benedict's visit, discussion of Somerset properties, and perhaps further clarification of this delicate new understanding between them. Until then, the returned glove would serve as tangible evidence that the past, while immutable, might yet be redeemed by present actions and future intentions. Morning brought unexpected visitors to Hartwick House, their arrival preceding the breakfast hour with unorthodox urgency. Lydia, summoned from her toilette by a flustered Margaret, descended to find Mr. Graves accompanied by an elderly gentleman of distinguished appearance, whose piercing grey eyes immediately proclaimed his identity even before introductions were performed. "Miss Aldermont," Mr. Graves began with uncharacteristic hesitation, "may I present Lord Richard Hawthorne, Earl of Westmoreland? His lordship arrived in London last evening and expressed immediate desire to make your acquaintance." "My dear girl," the Earl announced, advancing with remarkable vigour for a gentleman of his advanced years, "so you are the young woman who has brought my nephew back to his senses and to London society in one fell swoop. Remarkable." He seized her hand in both of his, examining her with the keen assessment of a connoisseur evaluating a fine painting. "Benedict described you with admirable accuracy, though he failed to capture the particular quality of composure you emanate. Quite refreshing in this age of vaporous femininity." Lydia, momentarily taken aback by this unconventional greeting, gathered her wits with practiced efficiency. "Lord Westmoreland, you honour my home with your presence. Please, may I offer refreshment after your journey? Tea, perhaps, or—" "No time for pleasantries, my dear," the Earl interrupted, though his tone remained affable rather than discourteous. "Pressing matters demand attention. Benedict remains unaware of my arrival in town, a strategic decision on my part. One must occasionally surprise these younger generations to properly assess their circumstances. Mr. Graves cleared his throat delicately. His lordship has certain questions regarding the arrangements between yourself and his grace. Understanding dawned with uncomfortable clarity. The Earl had come to investigate, perhaps even to challenge, the developing connection between his nephew and the eldest Aldermont daughter. Given the discrepancy in their stations and the complicated history of their prior understanding, such intervention was perhaps inevitable if unwelcome. "I see," Lydia responded, maintaining her composure despite the flutter of apprehension beneath her ribs. "Perhaps we might adjourn to the morning room, where conversation may proceed with greater comfort." The Earl followed her with surprising agility, his walking stick tapping a rhythmic accompaniment to their progress through the modest hallway. Once seated, he declined offered refreshments with an impatient wave, fixing Lydia with a penetrating stare that suggested prevarication would be both detected and deplored. "Now then, Miss Aldermont, let us speak with candor befitting the gravity of our subject. My nephew has undertaken significant financial commitments on your behalf, the settlement of your father's debts, the transfer of property deeds, various arrangements with creditors and bankers, all executed with remarkable haste and minimal consultation with family advisors." Lydia's spine stiffened imperceptibly. "If you have concerns regarding His Grace's judgment in these matters, sir, perhaps they might be more appropriately addressed to him directly." A gleam of approval flickered in the Earl's expression. "Precisely the response I anticipated. Directness rather than defensiveness." He leaned forward, his gaze unwavering. "My concern, Miss Aldermont, is not for Benedict's financial decisions. His fortune is substantial enough to withstand far greater expenditure than what he has devoted to your situation. Rather, I question the precipitous nature of his actions following 5 years of determined separation from London society in general and the Aldermont family in particular. His Grace's motives are his own to explain," Lydia replied carefully. "I can speak only to my acceptance of his assistance, which came after considerable deliberation regarding both propriety and independence." "Independence," the Earl echoed thoughtfully. "An unusual preoccupation for a gentlewoman in your position. Most would have accepted such generosity without hesitation, particularly when accompanied by marital intentions." Lydia's breath caught. "Lord Westmoreland, I believe you may have been misinformed regarding the precise nature of the understanding between His Grace and myself." "Have I?" The Earl's eyebrows rose toward his receding hairline. "Benedict appeared at the Wintertons' assembly last evening with you upon his arm, his first social engagement in half a decade. He has settled your family's financial entanglements with extraordinary thoroughness. My sources inform me that he visits Hartwick House daily, with a regularity that suggests far more than casual acquaintance." He tapped his walking stick against the floor for emphasis. "Most significantly, the Greystone sapphire has been removed from the family vault after decades of dormancy." The mention of the ring, the magnificent sapphire Benedict had shown her, confirmed Lydia's suspicion that this interview constituted a formal assessment of her suitability as a potential addition to the Hawthorne family. The realization brought both indignation and a curious sense of validation. One did not interrogate mere social acquaintances with such thoroughness. "Your lordship is remarkably well informed," she observed, meeting his gaze steadily. "However, certain nuances may have escaped even your diligent sources. While His Grace has indeed demonstrated extraordinary generosity and attention, no formal arrangement exists between us. The renewal of our acquaintance remains precisely that, a rediscovery of compatibility after years of separation." The Earl studied her with narrowed eyes, his assessment palpable in the morning room's hushed atmosphere. "You speak with admirable restraint, Miss Aldermont. Most women in your position would grasp at any suggestion of attachment to one of Benedict's station and fortune." "I am not most women, sir," Lydia replied simply. "Nor do I regard marriage as a solution to financial difficulties or social advancement. If such were my ambition, opportunities existed in the past that I chose not to pursue." "Yes, I am aware of your refusal of Sir William Hartley's offer 2 years ago," the Earl acknowledged, surprising Lydia with the extent of his intelligence gathering. "A respectable baronet with considerable holdings in Yorkshire. Many considered your rejection incomprehensible given your circumstances. Sir William required a decorative hostess and potential mother to his heirs. He did not require a wife with opinions, intelligence, or independent thought." Lydia folded her hands in her lap, her posture straight as a queen's despite her modest surroundings. "I prefer dignity in reduced circumstances to luxury purchased through the surrender of my essential self." A slow smile transformed the Earl's austere countenance. "Excellently stated, my dear. Precisely the response I hope to elicit." He leaned back in his chair, apparently satisfied with some private conclusion. Benedict requires precisely what you describe, not a decorative appendage to his title, but a partner of substance and integrity. The Greystone dukedom has suffered from an excess of marriages based on political advantage rather than complementary character. The conversation's abrupt shift from interrogation to apparent approval left Lydia momentarily speechless. Before she could formulate a suitable response, the Earl continued with increased animation. Lady Augusta will approve of you tremendously, I suspect. She has despaired of Benedict's prolonged isolation and resistance to suitable matches. His fixation on duty above personal happiness has been a source of considerable family concern. He tapped his walking stick decisively against the floor. You must come to Silvermere for Christmas. The northern air will bring colour to your cheeks, and the library contains volumes that would interest a woman of your evident intellectual capacity. Your lordship, Lydia interjected, finding her voice at last, I fear you have reached conclusions that exceed current circumstances. While I value His Grace's renewed acquaintance, our future association remains undetermined. The Earl waved away her protest with the confidence of one accustomed to having reality conform to his expectations. Nonsense! Benedict's actions speak with perfect clarity. The boy has finally recognized what he sacrificed on the altar of misguided propriety 5 years ago. His return to your doorstep represents the rarest of male behaviors, the admission of error and the determination to rectify it. A discreet knock at the morning-room door heralded Margaret's appearance. Forgive the interruption, miss, but His Grace the Duke of Greystone has arrived. The Earl's expression brightened with triumphant satisfaction. Excellent timing. Send him in directly, good woman. My nephew and I have much to discuss. Benedict's entrance brought with it an immediate alteration in the room's atmosphere, his commanding presence filling the modest space with unconscious authority. His expression, upon recognizing his unexpected relative, shifted from momentary surprise to wary acknowledgement. Uncle Richard, he greeted, executing a formal bow that contained a hint of irony. Your presence in London is unexpected. I had understood you intended to remain at Westmoreland Park until spring. Plans change, nephew, as you well know. The Earl rose, extending his hand with evident affection despite his sardonic tone. When one's closest blood relation suddenly reverses years of seclusion and begins making substantial financial arrangements without consultation, a responsible elder might reasonably investigate. Benedict's gaze shifted to Lydia, concern evident in his expression. I trust my uncle has not overly imposed upon your patience, Miss Aldermont. On the contrary, she assured him, managing a small smile despite the morning's disconcerting developments. Lord Westmoreland has been most illuminating in his observations. I've no doubt, Benedict responded dryly. My uncle's talent for direct inquiry is legendary within diplomatic circles. Former ambassadors still speak with awe of his interrogative techniques. The Earl chuckled, clearly unperturbed by his nephew's characterization. One must be thorough when family legacy is concerned, Benedict, particularly when that legacy may soon include new members. He turned to Lydia with unexpected gallantry. Miss Aldermont has acquitted herself admirably under examination. Lady Augusta will be thoroughly pleased with your choice, assuming you have sufficient wisdom to secure it properly. A dull flush rose in Benedict's normally composed features. Uncle, your presumption exceeds even your usual boundaries. Miss Aldermont and I are reconnecting after an unfortunate separation. Yes, she has explained with admirable discretion. The Earl waved his walking stick dismissively. Spare me the diplomatic evasions, nephew. I am too old and too perceptive for such nonsense. The Greystone sapphire has left the vault, and you appear at social functions after half a decade of determined absence. One need not be a Bow Street runner to deduce your intentions. Lydia, sensing Benedict's increasing discomfort with this direct assault upon his private affairs, intervened with gentle authority. Gentlemen, perhaps we might adjourn to the drawing-room, where refreshments await. The morning grows advanced, and I suspect neither of you has properly breakfasted. This practical suggestion, delivered with calm assurance, effectively redirected the conversation's mounting tension. The Earl nodded approvingly, while Benedict's expression conveyed silent gratitude for her diplomatic intervention. As they proceeded toward the drawing-room, the Earl fell into step beside Lydia, leaving Benedict to follow. You handle difficult social circumstances with remarkable dexterity, my dear, he observed in a lowered voice meant for her ears alone. A most valuable attribute in a duchess, if I may say so. Lydia met his knowing gaze with composed dignity. I would suggest, your lordship, that such attributes might prove valuable in any station, regardless of title or expectation. The Earl's delighted laughter echoed through the modest hallway of Hartwick House, heralding a morning that had veered dramatically from Lydia's anticipated routine into uncharted territories of familial evaluation and implicit approval. Whatever Benedict had intended for their afternoon discussion of Somerset properties, his uncle's unanticipated arrival had accelerated matters beyond anyone's careful planning. Perhaps, Lydia reflected, with mingled apprehension and anticipation, including his own. The following week unfolded with unprecedented activity at Hartwick House, transforming the once quiet residence into a hub of social and practical engagement. Lord Westmoreland's unexpected appearance had catalyzed a series of developments that Lydia observed with a mixture of bemusement and cautious optimism. Benedict, apparently recognizing the futility of maintaining pretenses before his perceptive uncle, had abandoned certain reservations regarding his intentions, though he continued to respect Lydia's request for measured progression in their renewed association. On this particular morning, Lydia sat in the library, reviewing correspondence that had arrived with the early post. Among the letters lay an unexpected missive bearing the aristocratic crest of the Dowager Duchess of Greystone, Benedict's formidable grandmother, Lady Augusta Hawthorne. The elegant script within expressed a formal invitation to tea at Greystone House that very afternoon. "Another summons from the Hawthorne clan?" Caroline inquired, sweeping into the library with characteristic dramatic flair. Her latest visit to Hartwick House had extended from a planned morning call to a 3-day residence, her curiosity regarding Lydia's evolving circumstances proving stronger than her husband's expectations of her return to Richmond. "Lady Augusta requests my company this afternoon," Lydia confirmed, carefully refolding the Duchess's note. "A development I find simultaneously flattering and somewhat daunting." Caroline settled into the window seat, arranging her fashionable skirts with practiced elegance. "The Dowager Duchess is a formidable figure, certainly, but Lord Westmoreland's approval surely predisposes her in your favour. The Hawthorns appear unified in their endorsement of this match." "There is no match as yet, Caroline," Lydia reminded her sister, though the protest had grown increasingly perfunctory as events progressed with their own momentum. "His Grace has expressed certain intentions, but no formal arrangement exists between us." "So you maintain," Caroline replied with sisterly skepticism, despite daily visits, public appearances arm in arm, and now familial inspections that suggest imminent incorporation into the Hawthorne dynasty. She leaned forward, her expression softening from teasing to genuine concern. "Lydia, I must ask, are you hesitant from genuine uncertainty or from fear that happiness, after so long denied, might prove ephemeral?" The question, delivered with uncharacteristic perception, struck uncomfortably close to truths Lydia had not fully acknowledged even to herself. Before she could formulate a response, Margaret appeared at the library door, her expression betraying barely contained excitement. "Miss, there's a carriage arrived, the grandest I've ever seen upon our doorstep, the Greystone crest upon the door, and footmen in full livery." Caroline sprang to the window, peering through the curtains with undisguised curiosity. "Good heavens, it's the Dowager's personal carriage, the midnight blue with silver appointments. I saw it at court presentation last season." She turned to Lydia with wide eyes. "Lady Augusta has come in person, rather than awaiting your attendance at tea." The significance of this development registered immediately. The Dowager Duchess of Greystone, at her advanced age and exalted position, rarely made social calls. Instead, society came to her at her convenience and invitation. For her to arrive unannounced at Hartwick House constituted an extraordinary departure from established protocol. "Margaret, please show Her Grace to the drawing-room immediately," Lydia instructed, smoothing her morning dress and mentally cataloguing the state of the modest room about to receive such distinguished scrutiny. "And prepare the Darjeeling with the blue porcelain service." "The blue porcelain?" Margaret repeated, clearly understanding the gravity of the situation. "Yes, miss, directly." As the maid hurried to execute these instructions, Caroline gripped Lydia's arm with uncharacteristic urgency. "Shall I withdraw? Perhaps my presence might prove intrusive during such a significant encounter." "Nonsense," Lydia replied firmly. "You are my sister and the wife of Lord Pembroke. Your presence is entirely appropriate for this visitation." What remained unspoken was Lydia's desire for familial support during what promised to be a consequential interview. They proceeded to the drawing-room with measured steps, Lydia's outward composure belying the flutter of apprehension beneath her ribs. The Dowager Duchess's reputation for penetrating judgment and uncompromising standards preceded her throughout London society. Even Caroline, normally irrepressible, appeared subdued by the prospect of this formidable encounter. Lady Augusta Hawthorne occupied the drawing-room's best chair with regal assurance, her ramrod posture and imperial bearing transforming the modest furniture into a throne by sheer force of presence. Despite her 80 years, her countenance remained remarkably undiminished, the famous Hawthorne cheekbones still prominent, the grey eyes clear and penetrating beneath silver brows arched in permanent skepticism. "Miss Aldermont," she announced without preamble as Lydia and Caroline entered, "I have come to take your measure directly, rather than await your arrival at Greystone House. At my age, one cannot afford the luxury of prolonged social ceremonies when important matters demand resolution." Lydia curtsied with perfect form, years of ingrained etiquette serving her well in this moment of scrutiny. "Your Grace honours my home with your presence. May I present my sister, Lady Caroline Pembroke?" Caroline executed her own curtsy with unusual precision, momentarily subdued by the Dowager's formidable aura. "Your Grace." Lady Augusta acknowledged Caroline with a regal inclination of her head before returning her penetrating gaze to Lydia. "I shall speak plainly, Miss Aldermont, as befits the gravity of our subject. My grandson has emerged from 5 years of self-imposed isolation, specifically to renew his acquaintance with you. This development, while unexpected, has been observed with considerable interest by those who hold his welfare in high regard." "I understand your Grace's concern," Lydia responded carefully. "His Grace's attentions have indeed been marked by particular consistency in recent weeks." "Consistency," the Dowager echoed with a hint of dry humour, a diplomatic characterization of behaviour that others might describe as single-minded determination. She adjusted her position slightly, the movement somehow suggesting a settling in for thorough examination. "Lord Westmoreland speaks highly of your character and composure under direct inquiry. He believes you would make a suitable addition to our family circle." Caroline inhaled audibly at this remarkably direct statement, while Lydia maintained her outward equanimity despite the significance of the Dowager's words. "His lordship is most kind in his assessment," she replied, though perhaps premature in his conclusions regarding future arrangements. A hint of approval flickered in Lady Augusta's expression. "You demonstrate admirable restraint, Miss Aldermont. Lesser women would grasp eagerly at such endorsement." She leaned forward slightly, her gaze intensifying. "Tell me, what is your understanding of my grandson's intentions toward you?" The directness of the query, bypassing all social niceties, momentarily caught Lydia off guard. Before she could formulate a suitably measured response, Margaret appeared with the tea service, providing a brief but welcome interruption to the Dowager's interrogation. "Ah, Darjeeling," Lady Augusta observed as the fragrant steam rose from the pot, "a civilized choice. One can discern much about a household from its selection of tea." Lydia seized the momentary respite to gather her thoughts, pouring the amber liquid with steady hands, despite her inner disquiet. "Your Grace asked about his Grace's intentions," she ventured once Margaret had withdrawn. "Benedict, his Grace, has expressed regret regarding our previous understanding and its unfortunate conclusion 5 years ago. He has demonstrated remarkable generosity in addressing certain financial difficulties that befell my family after my father's passing." "Yes, yes," the Dowager waved an imperious hand. "The settlement of debts, the transfer of property deeds, all accomplished with uncharacteristic haste and minimal consultation with family advisors. But these are merely external manifestations. What of his personal declarations? Has he spoken of marriage, Miss Aldermont?" The bluntness of the question hung in the air between them. Caroline's wide-eyed gaze darted between Lydia and the Duchess, anticipating her sister's response with barely concealed fascination. "His Grace has indicated that such an arrangement would be welcomed," Lydia admitted finally, choosing honesty over discretion. "However, I have requested time to re-establish our acquaintance before considering more formal commitments. 5 years of separation cannot be bridged hastily, regardless of prior understanding or current inclination." Lady Augusta's expression remained unreadable as she sipped her tea with aristocratic precision. "A prudent approach," she pronounced eventually. "Hasty attachments rarely withstand the test of time and circumstance." She set down her cup with a decisive click against the saucer. "However, I must inquire as to your own sentiments regarding my grandson. His regard appears established beyond question. What of yours, Miss Aldermont?" The direct inquiry into her feelings, delivered by this formidable matriarch in the presence of her sister, placed Lydia in a position of uncomfortable vulnerability. Yet she recognized that evasion would serve no purpose before Lady Augusta's penetrating perception. "I hold his Grace in the highest esteem," she began carefully weighing each word. "His character, his principles, his unwavering sense of responsibility, these qualities command respect from all who know him truly. As for deeper sentiments, she paused, searching for language adequate to the complexity of her feelings. I find myself increasingly drawn to the man he has become during our years apart. The transformation from the formal, duty-bound gentleman I once knew to the more reflective, emotionally present individual who now visits Hartwick House daily is compelling. A flicker of something resembling satisfaction crossed Lady Augusta's austere features. Eloquently expressed, if somewhat restrained, passion need not announce itself with theatrical declaration to burn true and lasting. She straightened imperceptibly, her posture suggesting a shift from interrogation to pronouncement. Miss Aldermont, having observed you directly and considered reports from trustworthy sources, I find myself in agreement with Lord Westmoreland's assessment. You possess the qualities essential for the role that appears increasingly inevitable in your future. Caroline could no longer contain herself. Then you approve of the match, Your Grace, she blurted, immediately flushing at her own forwardness. The dowager's silver eyebrows rose fractionally at this breach of decorum, but her response emerged without censure. I approve of Miss Aldermont's character, composure, and evident intelligence. As for the match, as you term it, that remains for the principals to determine through their own discernment. She turned back to Lydia with renewed focus. However, should such an arrangement materialize, certain practical matters must be addressed. The Greystone Duchess requires appropriate presentation to society. Presentation? Lydia echoed, momentarily confused by this unexpected turn in the conversation. Indeed, your reintroduction at the Wintertons' assembly was merely preliminary, a tentative emergence rather than a formal establishment of position. Lady Augusta's tone shifted from evaluation to pragmatic planning. The Greystone Winter Ball occurs annually in mid-December. It has been suspended these past 5 years due to Benedict's withdrawal from society, but circumstances now warrant its revival. The implications of this pronouncement registered with stunning clarity. The Greystone Winter Ball had historically been among the most prestigious social events of the season, attendance coveted, invitations treasured, as concrete evidence of social acceptance at the highest level. Your Grace suggests reviving this tradition now? Lydia inquired, carefully navigating the unstated but clear subtext of the Dowager's proposition. I suggest nothing, Miss Aldermont. I declare it as established fact. Lady Augusta's tone permitted no contradiction. Preparations have already commenced at Greystone House. The ball shall serve as both a celebration of Benedict's return to society and an introduction of you as his chosen companion, regardless of whether formal announcement has occurred by that date. Caroline's barely suppressed gasp emphasized the significance of this declaration. For the Dowager Duchess of Greystone to publicly endorse Lydia's association with Benedict, even without formal betrothal, constituted social validation of the highest order. Your Grace is most generous, Lydia responded, genuine emotion coloring her carefully chosen words. Such public acknowledgement exceeds all expectation or entitlement. Generosity has no bearing on the matter, Lady Augusta corrected with characteristic directness. The Greystone name requires worthy representation. You have demonstrated qualities that recommend you for such responsibility. She rose with surprising agility for her advanced years, signaling the interview's conclusion. I shall expect you at Greystone House tomorrow afternoon to begin discussions regarding the ball's arrangements. 3 o'clock precisely. My grandson will provide escort. With this pronouncement delivered as established fact rather than invitation, the Dowager prepared to depart. Lydia and Caroline rose as well, curtsying as protocol demanded. At the drawing-room threshold, Lady Augusta paused, turning back with an expression that softened momentarily from imperial assessment to something approaching humanity. Miss Aldermont, one final observation. My grandson smiles in your presence. After 5 years of rigid solemnity, this transformation alone would merit my approval, regardless of other considerations. With this unexpected personal disclosure, the Dowager Duchess of Greystone departed Hartwick House, leaving in her wake a profound shift in Lydia's circumstances and prospects, a recalibration of possibilities that neither she nor anyone else could have anticipated when Benedict Hawthorne had appeared at her door that rain-soaked evening, speaking of claims and lost opportunities. The Greystone Winter Ball transformed the austere elegance of Greystone House into a veritable palace of light and refinement. Hundreds of candles illuminated the grand ballroom, their golden radiance captured and multiplied by crystal chandeliers suspended from the vaulted ceiling like frozen constellations. Garlands of evergreen and white roses, The latter, imported at considerable expense despite the season, adorned marble columns and gilded archways, their subtle fragrance mingling with the more assertive notes of beeswax and expensive perfumes. Lydia observed these preparations from the relative sanctuary of Lady Augusta's private sitting room, where final adjustments to her appearance were being conducted under the dowager's exacting supervision. The gown she wore represented a compromise between her own preference for restraint and Caroline's insistence upon appropriate grandeur. Silver silk with delicate embroidery of midnight blue, the colors of the Greystone Duchy subtly incorporated into the design. The sapphire would complete the ensemble perfectly, Lady Augusta observed, her tone suggesting command rather than suggestion. Benedict informed me he has offered it for your consideration. He has, Lydia acknowledged, meeting the dowager's penetrating gaze in the mirror's reflection. However, I felt it premature to accept such a significant piece without formal announcement of our understanding. A hint of approval flickered across Lady Augusta's austere features. Your discretion does you credit, my dear. However, tonight's gathering renders such hesitation unnecessary. She gestured to her lady's maid, who presented a small velvet box with ceremonial solemnity. My grandson asked that I deliver this to you along with a message. What was once offered from duty is now presented from devotion. Lydia's breath caught as Lady Augusta opened the box to reveal the Greystone sapphire, the magnificent ring Benedict had shown her weeks earlier, its deep azure depths capturing and transforming the candlelight into mystical inner fire. The tradition spans 5 generations, the dowager explained, her voice softening with rare sentimentality. Each Duchess of Greystone has worn this sapphire as symbol of her position and her connection to the family legacy. Benedict's grandfather presented it to me in this very room, 62 years ago. She removed the ring from its velvet nest, holding it with unexpected delicacy between age-spotted fingers. Its acceptance signifies more than ornamental display, Miss Aldermont. It represents entry into a lineage that carries both privilege and profound responsibility. The moment hung suspended between them, the elderly aristocrat offering not merely a jewel, but an inheritance of position and purpose, the younger woman poised at the threshold of transformation. With steady hands, Lydia accepted the sapphire, its substantial weight belying its delicate appearance. I understand the significance, Your Grace, she said softly, slipping the ring onto her finger with deliberate purpose, and I accept both the honor and the obligation it represents. Lady Augusta nodded once, satisfaction evident in the set of her shoulders. Excellent. Now we may proceed to the ball with all elements appropriately aligned. The grand staircase of Greystone House presented a formidable descent under optimal conditions, its marble steps gleaming beneath priceless Aubusson runners, its ornate balustrade polished to mirror-like perfection. Tonight, with London's elite assembled below in expectant observation, each step represented a declaration of intent, a public statement more binding than legal documents. Benedict awaited at the staircase's foot, his formal evening attire emphasizing the powerful lines of his frame, black superfine tailored to perfection, starched white linen providing crisp contrast, the single adornment a stick pin of sapphire that matched the ring now adorning Lydia's hand. As she began her descent with Lady Augusta, his gaze locked with hers, the intensity of his expression causing a momentary faltering in her measured pace. "Composure, my dear," Lady Augusta murmured without moving her lips, her own descent a masterclass in aristocratic grace. "Remember, they observe not merely a woman but the future Duchess of Greystone. Your deportment establishes their expectations for decades to come." Lydia straightened imperceptibly, chin lifting with quiet dignity as she continued downward. The assembled guests, hundreds of London's most influential and titled, fell into gradual silence as her progress continued, attention shifting from individual conversations to collective observation of this pivotal social moment. At the staircase's foot, Benedict extended his hand, a gesture simultaneously formal and profoundly intimate. As Lydia's fingers met his, the sapphire caught the light, its brilliance drawing audible reactions from nearby observers. "The Greystone sapphire," someone whispered with unmistakable awe. "He has given her the sapphire." "You wear it well," Benedict murmured, his voice pitched for her ears alone despite their public positioning. "As I knew you would." Before Lydia could respond, the orchestra struck the opening chords of a waltz, not the traditional opening polonaise, but the more intimate dance that had marked their public re-emergence at the Wintertons' assembly. The deliberate choice could not have been more clear. Benedict was establishing continuity between past reconciliation and present declaration. "Shall we?" he asked, the simple question weighted with significance that transcended the immediate context. Lydia placed her hand upon his arm in wordless assent, allowing him to lead her to the center of the ballroom, where space had been cleared in apparent anticipation of this moment. As they took position, her hand upon his shoulder, his at her waist, their other hands joined. The watching crowd receded from her awareness, leaving only the man before her and the unspoken promise between them. "I had planned a more private setting for this conversation," Benedict admitted, as they began to move in perfect synchronization, their steps matching as if choreographed through years of partnership rather than recent reacquaintance. However, circumstances appear to have developed their own momentum. "Circumstances?" Lydia echoed with gentle humor. "Or your grandmother's inexorable will?" A smile touched his lips, transforming his severe features into something approaching boyish charm. "Lady Augusta has always possessed remarkable talent for orchestrating events to her satisfaction, though in this instance I find myself grateful for her intervention." They circled the floor in matched rhythm, other couples gradually joining the dance as protocol permitted, though maintaining respectful distance from the central pair, whose significance this evening could not be mistaken. "The sapphire suits you," Benedict observed, his gaze dropping momentarily to the ring glittering upon her hand. "More importantly, you honor it with your acceptance." The ring itself, while beautiful beyond description, holds significance not for its material value, but for what it represents, Lydia replied, choosing her words with care despite the intimacy of their exchange. Continuity, commitment, connection to something larger than individual desire or circumstance. Benedict's eyes darkened with emotion that transformed his customarily composed expression. "You comprehend its meaning perfectly." His hand tightened fractionally at her waist, drawing her infinitesimally closer within the bounds of proper form. "Lydia, I had intended a more formal declaration, in privacy rather than amid hundreds of observers. Yet perhaps there is fitting symmetry in this moment. Our understanding, sundered by pride and misunderstanding in public view 5 years ago, now restored before these same witnesses." The waltz carried them past Caroline and Lord Pembroke, her sister's face alight with barely contained delight at the unfolding scene. Beyond them, Lord Westmoreland observed with undisguised satisfaction, while Lady Augusta maintained regal impassivity that nevertheless conveyed complete approval. "5 years ago," Lydia said softly, "you offered marriage as fulfillment of family obligation and social expectation. The gesture, while honorable in intent, lacked the essential foundation for lasting union. And now?" Benedict's question emerged with uncharacteristic vulnerability, the fearsome Duke of Greystone momentarily transformed into a man awaiting judgment on matters more consequential than parliamentary legislation or financial empires. Lydia met his gaze directly, years of carefully maintained composure, allowing her this moment of perfect honesty, despite the hundreds of watching eyes. "Now you offer partnership founded upon mutual respect, shared understanding, and personal devotion rather than abstract duty. The distinction makes all difference in the world." As the waltz approached its conclusion, Benedict drew them to a subtle halt in the ballroom's center, their position immediately noted by the watching assembly. Conversation diminished to hushed anticipation as he took both her hands in his, the gesture transforming their private exchange into public declaration. "Miss Lydia Aldermont," he began, his voice carrying with the practiced projection of a man accustomed to commanding parliamentary attention. "5 years ago, I committed the gravest error of judgment in withdrawing from our understanding. Tonight, before these witnesses, I seek to rectify that failing by asking you to accept my hand in marriage, not from obligation, but from the deepest devotion of which my heart is capable." The assembled guests collectively held their breath, the moment suspended in crystal clarity that would be recounted in drawing rooms and correspondence for months to come. Lydia stood perfectly still, the sapphire's weight upon her finger, a tangible reminder of both history and future possibility. "Your Grace," she responded, her voice steady despite the emotion tightening her throat, "I accept your proposal, not for title or fortune, but for the man of honor and integrity I have come to cherish beyond all expectation or prior hope." A murmur of approval rippled through the gathering, quickly building to more demonstrative acknowledgement as Benedict raised her hand to his lips in formal sealing of their engagement. The orchestra, apparently prepared for this development, immediately launched into triumphant music that signaled the official announcement of a betrothal recognized and celebrated by the highest echelons of society. As congratulations engulfed them from all sides, Caroline's exuberant embrace, Lord Westmoreland's hearty handshake, Lady Augusta's regal nod of approval, Lydia found herself momentarily overwhelmed by the sheer improbability of the journey that had led to this moment. From quiet spinsterhood and impending financial ruin to publicly acknowledged future duchess in mere weeks, the transformation defied all reasonable expectation or conventional social trajectory. Yet as Benedict's hand found hers amid the crush of well-wishers, his fingers curling protectively around hers with both strength and gentleness, she recognized that the external circumstances, however dramatic, represented merely the visible manifestation of a more profound inner journey, from resignation to renewed possibility, from dignified solitude to chosen partnership. The Greystone sapphire caught the candlelight as she accepted congratulations with composed grace, its azure depths reflecting not merely centuries of aristocratic heritage, but the unexpected second chance that had arrived at her door on a rain-soaked evening when all hope seemed lost. Whatever challenges the future might hold, whatever responsibilities their union might entail, they would face them together, not as duke and spinster, but as two souls who had traversed the difficult territory from pride to genuine devotion and emerged the stronger for the journey. Spring arrived at Silvermere with gentle insistence, coaxing dormant gardens into reluctant bloom after the protracted northern winter. From the terrace of the ancient manor house, Lydia observed the transformation of the landscape with quiet appreciation, crocuses pushing through melting snow, the earliest roses unfurling tentative buds, morning mist retreating before strengthening sunlight. 6 months had passed since the Greystone Winter Ball and the public announcement of her betrothal to Benedict. Their wedding, a surprisingly intimate ceremony at St. George's, attended by family and close connections rather than the entire aristocracy, had occurred in February, defying convention that dictated lengthy engagements for unions of such social consequence. Lady Augusta, having secured her primary objective of ensuring Benedict's matrimonial future, had proven unexpectedly accommodating regarding the ceremony's timing and scale. Contemplating horticultural improvements, Benedict's voice interrupted her reverie as he joined her on the terrace, morning correspondence in hand. The head gardener submitted elaborate proposals yesterday, something about Italian-inspired formal beds that would require relocating half the ancestral oaks. Lydia smiled, accepting both his brief kiss and the stack of letters he offered. Mr. Thornhill's enthusiasm occasionally exceeds practicality. Perhaps we might incorporate elements of his vision without wholesale destruction of trees that witnessed the Tudor dynasty. A diplomatic compromise. Benedict leaned against the stone balustrade beside her, his posture more relaxed than she had ever observed during their earlier acquaintance. Marriage and removal to the northern estate had softened certain rigid aspects of his bearing without diminishing his essential dignity. The Duchess of Greystone, already renowned for wise arbitration between tradition and innovation, the title still startled Lydia occasionally, despite 6 months of formal address by servants and social acquaintances. She glanced down at the Greystone sapphire, now accompanied by a wedding band of platinum and smaller diamonds, their combined weight familiar yet still somewhat miraculous upon her finger. Lady Augusta's latest correspondence arrived this morning, Benedict continued, indicating a particular letter bearing the Dowager's distinctive seal. She expresses satisfaction with our stewardship of Silvermere and anticipates her summer visit with moderate optimism regarding agricultural improvements and household management. Lydia laughed softly, recognizing the characteristic backhanded approval in her grandmother-in-law's phrasing. High praise indeed from such a discriminating source. Her previous communication mentioned merely cautious acknowledgement of competent oversight. Their shared amusement reflected the comfortable partnership that had developed between them, a connection founded on mutual respect that had blossomed into deeper attachment with each passing month. What had begun as reconciliation had transformed into genuine communion of spirit, their complementary strengths creating a union stronger than either might have achieved individually. The local tenants seem equally satisfied, Benedict observed, his gaze sweeping the distant fields where spring planting had commenced. The new cottages are nearly completed, and the schoolhouse renovations proceed ahead of schedule. These projects represented their shared vision for the estate, not merely preservation of aristocratic privilege, but genuine improvement in the lives of those dependent upon Greystone lands and protection. Lydia had brought her organizational abilities and compassionate insight to complement Benedict's resources and authority, their combined efforts already yielding tangible results throughout the surrounding communities. Caroline writes from London, Lydia noted, opening her sister's letter with anticipatory pleasure. She reports that our educational foundation for young women has received Parliament's formal recognition. Lord Pembroke presented our petition himself, apparently delivering quite the impassioned address regarding female intellectual development. Benedict's eyebrows rose in mild surprise. Your influence upon your brother-in-law appears substantial. I recall him expressing considerably more traditional views regarding feminine education when first we met. Caroline's influence, not mine, Lydia corrected with sisterly loyalty. She has discovered previously untapped diplomatic talents in marriage. Frederick may believe himself unchanged in principle, but his actions increasingly reflect her progressive sensibilities. A comfortable silence settled between them as they surveyed the awakening landscape, the morning sun burning away the last wisps of mist from the formal gardens. In the distance, a carriage appeared upon the main approach, the regular mail delivery bringing connection to the wider world beyond Silvermere's self-contained domain. I received word from Somerset yesterday, Benedict mentioned after a moment, his tone carefully neutral, in a manner that immediately captured Lydia's attention. The renovations of your father's former property in Thornfield are complete. The statement hung between them, weighted with unspoken significance. The small estate in Somerset, sold years earlier to cover the first of her father's substantial debts, had been repurchased by Benedict shortly after their marriage, the transaction conducted with characteristic efficiency and minimal fanfare. The property managers report that the orchards show promise of excellent harvest this autumn, he continued, watching her face with attentive care. The cottage itself has been restored according to your specifications, the library shelves rebuilt, the garden paths relaid as you remembered them. Emotion tightened Lydia's throat as memories of childhood happiness surfaced. Summer afternoons reading beneath apple trees, her mother's careful tending of lavender borders, her father's voice before financial obsession claimed his better nature. You've gone to extraordinary lengths to reclaim a relatively modest property, she observed, maintaining composure despite the surge of feeling his thoughtfulness provoked. Not for the property itself, Benedict replied simply, but for what it represents. Your earliest happiness, your foundation before circumstance required you to become caretaker rather than carefree daughter. He took her hand, his thumb brushing lightly across the sapphire's faceted surface. I cannot restore lost years or erase painful memories, but I can perhaps provide tangible evidence that what was taken may sometimes be returned. That loss need not always remain permanent. The gesture, characteristic of the man he had become during their months together, embodied the transformation that had occurred in them both. Benedict had shed the rigid formality that once armored him against genuine connection. Lydia had relinquished the self-sufficiency that protected her from disappointment. Together, they had constructed something neither could have achieved alone, a partnership founded on mutual vulnerability rather than isolated strength. I have something for you as well, Lydia said after a moment, withdrawing a small package from her pocket. Though it cannot compare to reclaimed estates or agricultural innovations, Benedict accepted the offering with visible curiosity, unwrapping the simple paper to reveal an object that drew an immediate reaction of recognition, a gentleman's glove of fine black leather, slightly aged yet meticulously preserved. My glove, he stated, genuine wonder coloring his tone. From our final meeting before 5 years of separation, Lydia completed gently. You kept my discarded glove throughout that time, preserving it as tangible connection to what had been lost. I discovered yours among my father's effects after his passing. Apparently he retrieved it from the garden path where you dropped it during your hasty departure. Benedict turned the glove in his hands, the simple object transformed by circumstance and sentiment into something approaching talisman. You've kept it all this time, as you kept mine, she acknowledged. Perhaps some part of me anticipated eventual reconciliation, even when rational thought dismissed such possibility. He drew her gently into his embrace, the morning sunshine warming them as Silvermere awoke to spring's renewal around them. From discarded gloves to matched hands, he murmured against her hair, a journey neither of us could have foreseen that day. Lydia lifted her face to his, the hard-won contentment of their present reality, still sometimes surprising in its completeness. The most feared duke crossed England to claim a spinster, she reminded him with quiet humour. Quite the scandal in certain drawing rooms, I'm told. Not to claim, he corrected, his voice softening with the emotion he no longer concealed behind ducal reserve, but to request, to petition, to acknowledge that what I once regarded as duty had transformed through absence and regret into devotion. Their kiss, witnessed only by awakening gardens and distant hills, sealed this truth between them. that sometimes the longest journeys lead not to new destinations, but to places we should never have abandoned. That pride's surrender often reveals treasures greater than its protection ever defended. That the heart's true nobility lies not in fearsome reputation, but in humble recognition of love's transformative power. As spring sunlight strengthened across Silvermere's ancient stones, the Duke and Duchess of Greystone stood united upon the terrace, their shared future unfolding before them with the same quiet promise as the season's gradual unfurling. Not with dramatic declaration or sudden transformation, but with the steady, inexorable growth of something planted in fertile soil, tended with care, and given freedom to become its truest self in its own perfect time. In the silence between pride and surrender lies the truest journey of the heart. We are taught that strength means never bending, that dignity requires absolute self-sufficiency. Yet the deepest wisdom emerges when we recognize that walls built to protect us often become our prisons. Benedict and Lydia's story reminds us that sometimes what appears as weakness, vulnerability, forgiveness, the courage to try again, requires greater strength than any display of power. The most feared duke had to cross not merely England, but the vast distance between arrogance and humility, between duty and devotion. The spinster had to traverse the equally challenging path from resigned dignity to renewed hope, risking disappointment to embrace possibility. Their journey teaches us that time, while it cannot be reclaimed, can be redeemed. The years that separated them were not wasted, but necessary, a crucible in which imperfect understanding was refined into deeper wisdom. Sometimes we must lose what we value to truly comprehend its worth. Sometimes the circle must break before it can be reformed into something stronger and more meaningful. Perhaps most profoundly, their story reminds us that our greatest transformations rarely announce themselves with dramatic gestures. They arrive in quiet moments of choice, when pride surrenders to love, when self-protection yields to trust, when we choose to see others not as they were or as we wish them to be, but as they truly are. The returned gloves between them symbolize this truth, that what was once discarded might become most precious, that seemingly small tokens can carry the weight of redemption. In a world that celebrates conquest and acquisition, Benedict and Lydia teach us that the most powerful journey is not to claim or possess, but to kneel in recognition of another's intrinsic worth. True nobility lies not in fearsome reputation or social position, but in the courage to cross whatever distance separates us from authentic connection, even when that distance was created by our own past mistakes. Their story whispers to us across time that it is never too late to begin again, that genuine devotion can emerge from the ashes of duty, that sometimes the most profound strength lies in opening our hands rather than clenching them into fists, and perhaps most hopefully it affirms that hearts which have known genuine suffering possess a unique capacity for genuine joy, not despite their scars, but because of the wisdom those scars have etched upon their souls. Did the journey of Benedict and Lydia touch your heart as deeply as it did mine? Their transformation from pride to devotion reminds us that second chances sometimes arrive when we least expect them, but most need them. If you've ever known the ache of missed opportunities or the joy of unexpected redemption, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. What moment in their story resonated most with you? Perhaps you've experienced your own journey from duty to devotion, or witnessed the power of genuine humility transforming a relationship in your life. Subscribe now to ensure you never miss our next historical romance, where hearts divided by circumstance find their way back to one another against all odds. Each week, we transport you to worlds where propriety battles passion, where societal expectations clash with genuine emotion, and where love ultimately prevails through the courage of those brave enough to pursue it. Click the subscribe button and join our community of readers who understand that the most compelling journeys are not those of conquest, but of transformation, one heart at a time.